Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Pensky Podcast. If you haven't tuned in before, this is a podcast where we're going through all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. Right now we're up to Who Watches the Watchers? It is episode 4 of season 3. In this one, the crew of the Enterprise has to rescue a observational team that's observing an alien race on a planet. Something goes haywire. The aliens on the planet discover the humans who are watching them and decide that Picard is a god. We're going to be joined by Clay to talk about this one. It's been a while. It feels good to be back on the saddle. So that won't mean anything if you're downloading these podcasts afterwards. But if you've been waiting anxiously on bated breath, we're back, and Clay is going to join us right after this.
Dr. Crusher.
Before you start quoting me the Prime Directive, he'd already seen us. The damage was done. It was either bring him aboard or let him die.
Then why didn't you let him die?
Because we were responsible for his injuries.
I'm not sure that I concur with that reasoning, Doctor. But now that he's here, you must remove all memory of his encounter with the away team.
By erasing short-term recall.
It has been accomplished before.
I am familiar with Dr. Pulaski's technique. But I can't guarantee it'll be effective on Mintalkan brain chemistry. Their lysome levels are much lower.
Hey everybody, welcome back. How's it going? We are here to discuss Who Watches the Watchers, episode 4, season 3, Star Trek The Next Generation. We're going to be joined by Clay. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I think this is Alan Moore's best work.
Yeah,
and I always thought it was strange how he took his name off the movie version, but I guess we'll get into that later.
Yeah. He doubled up on that scene in First Contact, with the scene where he brings the woman out and shows her the observation lounge and then has her look out the window. He brought that one back, but this is originally where he wrote it. No, it's not Alan Moore, unfortunately. This was written by Richard Manning and Hans Beemler, who are a returning writing pair for Star Trek. So yeah, we watched Who Watches the Watchers. It's been a while. We haven't talked Star Trek in what feels like a long time. I guess that's because we put out 2 a week of these things. What did you think of this episode after The Survivors was the one that we had all watched previously?
I think this is 2 in a row for me that I actually really liked.
Yeah.
This one was pretty sedate, but I thought the stuff, the things they were dealing with, the concepts they were dealing with were really interesting, and I thought they handled them pretty well.
Yeah, it's I came into this one. This one was one that I always sort of remembered as not being great. So I was pleasantly surprised because I think it might be one of the better Prime Directive episodes that they deal with.
Yeah, this the first biggest change between this episode and previous Prime Directive episodes is that the Prime Directive stuff they talk about actually has some weight to it.
Yes,
and they don't just blow right through it.
Yeah, it is.
Well, they do eventually, but not at the beginning.
Yeah, it's it kind of has the they're never really able to make a hugely convincing argument in my opinion about when they should follow the Prime Directive. Like I probably think the weakest part of this episode is maybe Picard's reaction to how, like, when shit starts to fall apart, his reaction to the guy in sickbay and everything. What do you think about how Picard handled everything here?
Man, he was cold as ice for about three-quarters of this episode, which I actually liked because, the thing with the Prime Directive is it's such a important part of the concept of the show, but I feel like it gets, it's the rules on which they follow it, or the closest to which they follow it, can be kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
So to have Picard straight up be like, well, then you should have let him die or kill him, was finally somebody is actually paying attention to these rules.
Yeah, he's I don't think it was out of character. as much it was maybe a little bit surprising or something. I think it's just the harshness of, like, he didn't even ask how the guy was doing. He was just like, you should have left him there to die.
Right.
After he fell off a rock pit. But he like, the Picard thing is he's always sort of sticking to this rule of the Prime Directive. I think, like, to my point earlier, like, it starts to fall apart is in my opinion, when they rescue the scientist and they bring him up and he's like, they already know about us. Like, the Prime Directive sort of no longer applies in this situation.
Yeah.
I found his argument kind of convincing, and Picard's sort of steadfastly being against it didn't make as much sense to me.
Yeah, there was a certain point where I wasn't really on board with the fact that let's put it this way. I think you're right. I think they could have just gone down and been like, hey guys, sorry, this is what's happening, instead of having a makeup party for Riker and Troi.
Yeah. Although it gave Troi something to do.
That's true. It
was funny because I think we talked in an earlier episode about how we thought that maybe a good development for Troi would be she'd be like a species specialist or something, and she kind of is that here. She seems to know a lot about these people.
Yeah,
for whatever reason, about how she had some weird sexually laced thing with Riker where she's like, the women get to debate the power or whatever.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Riker's all into that. Yeah, but it was really just I can sort of understand the sending down Riker and Troi in makeup to see if they can rescue this guy.
Yeah, but but at that point, the damage is already done.
It is, right? Well, because they don't know. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, if they can get him, I guess the thing is, if they can get him before anyone else sees him, then they can still kind of scoot out of there. Which is like that's almost even worse.
Well, they had this thing when Troi and Riker went down. After they've had this big debate about the Prime Directive, is like, we can't interfere with their culture or whatever.
But we can put on fake mustaches and pretend to be one of them,
and also lie to them.
Yeah,
so you can lie to a culture, but you can't tell them the truth. Like, that falls in line with the Prime Directive, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and also when they're having that boardroom meeting with Picard and the scientist, doesn't the scientist basically say, you should just go down there and pretend to be their god?
Yes.
That doesn't help anybody. That's like the worst possible decision.
But it would be really, really cool.
Yeah, it would be. He should have been like, you should do that, or if you don't want to do it, I can do it.
He'll put on like a little Picard name tag and be like, I'm the Picard.
I can do like a basic chemistry experiment, and they'll think that I know magic. It'll be great.
Really the most unfortunate event about this is that when I don't know their names, the guy alien, the father alien who gets brought up to the ship originally after falling.
You mean the guy who gets all the steel dropped on him in RoboCop? Yeah,
it's Ray Wise.
Yeah,
is the actor. He's
all this
could have been avoided if, when he woke up, if Picard was not just standing in a beam of light for whatever reason.
Yeah, if Picard hadn't been getting his glamour shot taken, it might have ended differently.
Yeah, if it was just Picard, sort of like tucking in his shirt or something, and just being like, "Oh, doctor, this guy's awake."
Also, I loved the idea of. First, I liked that they name dropped Pulaski as being the person who was pioneering this mind erasing technique
in a sort of backhanded way by Picard. I thought Beverly reacts to it. She's like, "I'm very familiar with Dr. Pulaski's technique," as though Picard has been saying, like, "Boy, I sure missed that Pulaski. I wonder whatever happened to her."
Well, the other thing is, it doesn't work. Like, they don't even. It's not even like. It's not even like kind of effective. It just doesn't work at all.
No, I think Troi says it didn't stick, or Riker. That sounds like a Riker thing to say. I think Riker might have said it just didn't stick. I think that's kind of one of the things about this episode is that. What
was Pulaski working on this tech, like, at night? Is that why she got kicked off? Did she get kicked off the ship because she was working on this?
She used it in
subversive mind wipe technique.
She went to the village. She used it in Pen Pals, the episode where Data befriends an alien girl, and he violates the Prime Directive to rescue her. And they mind wipe her to send her back to her planet. Yeah, I think that one of the, because I agree with you. I thought this was like a really strong episode. I don't think it's quite as good as Survivors, but I think it's pretty solid for what it is.
Yeah.
I think the show is definitely getting better at sort of building their plot points about how they want the action to go through.
Yeah.
The problem with it here, which isn't really a problem unless you start to really think about it, but the show's getting better at sort of disguising the plot contrivances that are necessary to get these plots going. Mm-hmm. These scientists don't seem to have a backup generator, which seems kind of crazy.
Yeah, so that was the one big issue I had with this episode was the thing that sets everything off is like they have a power surge or something at their outlook post.
Yeah.
That is lethal, but they never come back to that. I mean, do they just? I don't know if I missed it. Do they just say that? Oh, that was just a freak thing that happened.
Yeah, I thought freak accident. I think
because I expected there to be some sort of like sabotage involved, but
no, it's just a freak accident.
This is an instance where I didn't mind though. In the past, I've talked about how I don't. It bugs me when they have these A and B stories that don't really line up or don't really cause any action to move forward.
Right.
And this one, I didn't really think. I was expecting something like that, but I didn't miss it. I thought the rest of it was good.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just like what I was saying. It was just the show's getting better at disguising it. Like if you really start to think about it, you start to see the gears that are happening that cause all these things to happen.
Yeah.
But like I now that I'm trying to think about it, it's blanking. But it's like the Watchers. The thing breaking down without a backup generator, and then sort of the just like these are the exact right people that you would want this to happen to.
Yeah.
They're like proto-Vulcans, they call them. So they're sort of logical, but they get around being totally Vulcans by saying things are reasonable instead of being logical, which is a nice development, I think, in the Vulcan.
And their eyebrows are slightly more arched.
Yeah, the bowl cuts are slightly more 70s than modern day Vulcans have them. Yeah, it's I thought this one was good. It had a few moments of it took a couple digs at religion, sort of that. While I don't even really care, sort of caught me off guard.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I found there was it wasn't so much a dig at religion as much as it was a dig at humanity, really. Because they were talking when Ray Wise comes back and he starts spouting off all this stuff about the Picard and the Overseer and all that kind of stuff. The woman who seems to be the leader of the group is like, we evolved past those silly notions a long time ago. Yeah. And it's like I didn't actually see it as much of a dig towards religion specifically as much as a dig towards the people of the modern day world who still believe that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe I guess you could read it either way, but
there was a line where he was about at the end when he was about to shoot Troi with the bow and arrow. Mm-hmm. And she's like, "This is what belief does." It felt like a very strong stance on like belief over reason, I guess, which I don't really mind. I thought I was more. I guess I was more like surprised that it was on TV. Sort of like a line like that would actually make it through, especially in '89. It was interesting though. It's just what do you think was the best scene out of this one?
Oh, the best scene. I would probably say the best scene was Picard and the woman on the Enterprise.
Yeah. In the conference room?
Yeah, where he's explaining to her that he's not a god and what he is.
Look at me. Look at me. Feel the warmth of my hand. The rhythm of my pulse. I'm not a supreme being. I'm flesh and blood, like you.
Not like me.
Like you. Different in appearance, yes. But we are both living beings. We are born, we grow, we live, and we die. In all the ways that matter, we are alike.
But you are the Picard.
There's something I want you to see.
And even up to the point where she seems to get it, but she doesn't get it.
Right, yeah.
I found it interesting how that got recycled in First Contact.
Yes.
And isn't the whole plot of this basically Star Trek Insurrection? Or at least the jumping off point of Insurrection? Sort
of. Well, it's a similar idea, but the reasons for interacting with the race is different.
Oh, okay.
If that makes any sense. So
yeah, I see. I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's along the same lines. I'd agree with you, though. I think that I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that scene in the conference room, the explaining of like how a bow and arrow would seem magical to someone who hadn't invented a bow and arrow yet.
Right.
And he's just a more advanced version of that. It was a nice little scene. Picard, Stewart plays it well. Stewart's acting, I think, was really good in this one.
Yeah, I also really liked the scene at the end where he's Ray Wise is threatening to shoot him with the bow and arrow. I thought that was good. I
didn't remember that he actually got shot.
Yeah, I was impressed.
He put it on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. They saved him by having someone randomly push Ray Wise, so he hits him in the shoulder instead of the heart or whatever he was aiming for. But
you know what I really liked about this? It's the subtext of Ray Wise's character.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would be really easy to write his character in this situation as just like an ignorant savage who just believes whatever. But the fact that his entire motivation for believing this is because he wants to get his wife back, I bought completely.
And that he legitimately saw something that is unexplainable to him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's not sort of having because I sort of went the other way, and I don't know if my idea would be better, but I was thinking while I was watching it, it seems like it would be more traditional if in the teaser or something they had explained that there was a sort of fundamentalist character of the aliens that none of them were really listening to. They're like, oh, he's like crazy old man or whatever.
Yeah.
And instead...
Like Randy Quaid in Independence Day?
Right, exactly. And if he instead saw this thing, or someone else saw it, and that confirmed this guy, and they all started to buy into his sort of crazy like fundamentalism or something.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. And I think what that would have helped for me is that there's people in this episode go through drastic changes of mind, especially the Ray Wise guy. He goes from being a guy who doesn't believe in the gods or the old ways or whatever.
Well, do they ever really? I can't remember, but do they ever really make that point that he doesn't believe in that stuff?
Well, I'm just drawing it from the leader. The leader seems to be saying that no one believes this anymore.
Okay. Yep.
And even the old guy that they do have, they just sort of ask him about what people used to believe. It doesn't seem like he really believes it.
Right.
He just seems to have the best handle on like the Wikipedia page or whatever.
By the way, the overseer that they're all talking about is Kirk, right? Kirk totally came down there and messed everything up, right?
He fought a lizard man, and they all saw it, and they were like, "What the hell is this?"
Exactly. Yes. So that is the Rock from Gorn, right?
If it isn't, it looks familiar.
Yeah,
they have shot there before.
It has to.
Yeah.
It's anyway. Sorry.
It hasn't aged, but yeah, it's that would have been my thing, like, because what he does is he goes from non-believing, or at least he never mentions it, to being totally convinced that there's a God, to realizing that God is not God and is just a man like him.
Yeah.
And he changes his mind a lot, where I feel like if he had only changed his mind once, it might have been a little bit more effective, or if this crazy sort of fundamentalist character changed his mind once. But that was a minor complaint.
Yeah, I liked what they did with him because they don't they're not explicit about his desire to get his wife back until the very end.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't throw that in your face, I think made it work a lot better.
Yes, that's I'd agree with that.
Because you can kind of... I can follow the logic of this character seeing something what seems to be supernatural. I mean, and his wife had only been dead for like 6 months or something, right?
Yeah, I assume she died in the floods that they mentioned, which were earlier. Yeah.
But regardless, it was a fairly new death.
Yep.
And him seeing the supernatural thing clicks with these old stories of a god, which then makes him think, oh, well, this god has power. Maybe he can bring back my wife. I really bought that line of reasoning completely.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's not unbelievable. My suggestion is really, really minor in terms of what it is. But I agree that I like these sort of, I appreciate that they all don't buy into it immediately. Like, he sort of has to convince them.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also like that his daughter didn't really... His daughter was kind of into it, but not as much as he was.
Yes, not a great actress on her part. I thought it was Pamela Adlon for a little bit, but it was not. And is her job seriously just to check the star chart every 5 minutes?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell that was.
Because that's the only reason she catches Riker, because she keeps checking that star chart for whatever reason.
Yeah, you could probably take her character out of the story and it wouldn't really matter.
No, well, I mean, she's there. Yeah, there to catch him, I guess, and she has to see him get hurt.
That's true.
That's
true. Yeah, she does need to see him get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good, and you know what? I felt this episode get a little bit strengthened from only using a few characters on the ship.
Yes, another episode where Geordi is noticeably absent.
He's in the cold open.
Oh, is he? I didn't even notice.
He's an idiot. He's the person who has to come in and ask the stupid question to have Picard explain what the plot is going to be.
Why doesn't their thing work or whatever?
He said, why does a crew of 3 need this super megawatt generator? and Picard's like, well, idiot, because they are observing this planet. And then he's like, that reminds me. My big problem, I guess. How is a holographic emitter different from the holodeck?
If you read the manual,
right. We need Sean to come on and explain what the transporter does.
Well, because one of them makes food, and the other one. Anyway, sorry, Sean.
But the logic behind it is, they're always like, shit can't get off the holodeck. Once it's off the holodeck, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And this thing seems to create, like, they can go up to the rock that it makes and knock on it. So it actually exists.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But it's not on the it's not like it's a image that they just can pass through or whatever.
Yeah.
They're actually making a holodeck material somehow out of the holodeck.
Well, here's another question. Why do they have to be there in person at all?
Yeah, that's another. Why can't they just be on a ship that's above
a satellite or something?
Yep. They just want to get real close.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the argument is, well, if they're not there in person, then the story doesn't happen. But
or I mean, you can obviously perform plastic surgery. Why wouldn't you just dress them up like the people, so that if they do get caught, they can just be like, "Oh, I'm from another village, 100 miles away, and you don't know me." Yeah.
Well, or you could still use the same basic plot, and it could still work if. If they have a monitor station that they're using from a satellite or something, and the person who ends up getting injured is someone who has to go down there and fix the thing or something. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
That, and also I guess they need the thing where the woman dies so they can show that they're
not gods.
Well, no, they could still do that, because if they had just tightened it up and used the guy who gets zapped and gets left there that they see, by the time they get him back to the ship, that woman is already still on the ship.
Yes.
So she could see him die.
Yep.
And that kind of tightens the whole story up a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have a question for you. Did Beverly intentionally let that woman die at the end?
I don't know what she did, but she asked for 50 cc's of something and then just lightly touched her on the chest.
On the chest with it. But it was just what a pawn that person was. Like, they fortunately sort of died, and that caused, the aliens to realize that they weren't gods.
Right.
But I've seen people in Star Trek die from, or, live through much worse than that woman seemed. She wasn't that old. She seemed all right. She was just kind of like...
It was a fairly disturbing death, too.
It was,
like, she had, like, this sort of death rattle and...
Yeah, Beverly wasn't slipping or any sort of like painkillers. It didn't seem.
Yeah.
She was suffering to the end.
Worf should have come in and looked her in the eyes as she died.
That is Klingon death scream. Yeah, not a lot of Worf in this one. He's there in the beginning. Same with Geordi. Mm-hmm. Riker, Troi have a little bit to do.
Yeah, I think you're right though. I do like its use of fewer characters. I think. What's tough when you get into when you have a show like this where you have a clear ensemble of, 10 to 12 people whose names are all in the credits.
Yep.
You feel like you have to use everybody in every episode.
Yes. They're all getting paid.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's nice when you can move away from that and have it not feel forced.
Yeah.
On either end, because when it does feel forced, like, oh, well, here's a scene that needs to have Data in it. We need to send these guys down to the planet because they're in the credits.
Right. Yeah.
It gets it feels your storytelling gets a little stiff.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. You just started having to shoehorn things into places, which certainly is a first and second season kind of problem.
Right.
I was a little bit surprised by the criticism of this episode. It's a real split. Between people who like it and don't like it.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
Which was... And I saw some very low grades for this one. Tor gave it a 3 out of 10, I think.
Wow, really?
Yeah. AV Club gave it an A.
What? Can you briefly summarize why Tor gave it such a low rating?
Yes, I can. Let's see here. Tor watches...
Because I would say, if I had to guess... Well, okay, so...
Give me what your big problems would be.
My biggest problem with this episode is the fact that it was shot in 1990 or 1988 or whatever. Because I thought the costuming and the look really did a disservice to it.
Oh, okay.
Like if this had been an episode of Battlestar Galactica...
Yep.
The remake of Battlestar Galactica, I think it would have hit a much stronger chord.
Yeah.
Just...
I'm starting to feel that about a lot of the episodes at this point.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of modern polish would go a long way.
Yeah.
To making it feel like something.
Like the costumes that the Montauk, I think is that their name? Montauk or something?
Minotians or something. Mintakans.
Yeah. Mintakans, sorry. Montauk, not like the monster in New Jersey.
Right,
but, the costumes they're wearing feel very old, and it's like Hollywood primitive.
Yes. Yeah.
Where it's a primitive culture, but everybody has puffy shirts and, knickerbockers.
Right. Yeah, and everything's made out of like burlap, basically. Like they don't have fine material. I'm just looking at a picture of Riker now. He looks like a genetically modified beetle wearing a burlap sack.
Well, yeah, they're dressed like they're doing the Legend of Zelda cosplay or something.
Yes, that's a good... Yeah, they would be like the guy who gives Link the sword or something.
Yes, exactly. And it's the thing with Riker and Troi just felt so hokey. I understand why they did it and why they had to do it, but just the fact that they're like, yeah, we can give you temporary plastic surgery to make you look like... which is incredibly quickly reversible.
Yes.
Because once Riker gets back on that ship, he is back to, William T. In the blink of an eye.
No, they should. If it's that easy and that like non-invasive, I feel like they should do it every time they meet a race. To make them more comfortable or something.
Right,
Be
exactly,
like, we'll fit in with you.
Yeah, but that and the scene with Picard and the girl on the ship. I don't know. There's just something about it. Maybe because I was thinking about the same scene in First Contact and how good that scene is, but it's just there's something. Her acting was a little bit over the top and like exceptionally primitive.
Yes. Although I think because I prefer this scene to the one in First Contact.
Oh, okay.
Because this one seems like it would be legitimately surprising to this person, where First Contact, that person knows that people can go into space.
That's true. That's a good point.
Because we've had the space travel and everything.
Right. They're about to hit warp speed in that movie. So
right. Yeah. So it's not like they're unfamiliar with a spaceship. But yeah, here's just a couple of trivial matters which are kind of interesting. The tapestry that Picard gets at the end of the episode continues to be seen in his quarters for the rest of the run of the show.
I was wondering if they were going to do that, because that'd be a nice little touch.
Yep. And this is the second of 3 times that Picard will bring a woman from a pre-warp society onto the Enterprise and wow the heck out of her by letting her look out the window. The first was Riven in Justice. Which is true, which was not very good. The next will be Lily Sloan in First Contact.
Hey man, it's the only card he's got, you know. It doesn't work on anybody who's on the ship, so.
Yeah, so I mean AV Club gave this an A. Let me show you, I'll read it briefly what this guy says is final summation. This is Tor.com. She has never seen a bow. I hated this episode when it first aired, and I actually hate it more now. I've often seen it cited as a favorite of the 3rd season and of the show in general, and to this day I will never understand why. We start on the wrong foot when Troi and Picard carry on about how rational the Mintankans are, or whatever they're called, which only makes sense because their evolution has paralleled Vulcan. Except, as established way back in Balance of Terror and re-emphasized any number of places, most notably All Our Yesterdays, Vulcans used to be a savage and brutal race, and only within the last few thousand years have adopted logic and suppressing of emotions, not because they're an orderly, rational people, but because they most assuredly weren't. That's a little bit of a fickle fan criticism.
Yeah, that's pushing it.
And then he continues, the episode continues in an unsubtle and unconvincing manner, with the characters falling into the old first season habit of describing themselves like they're reading from a textbook about their culture rather than talking about their own lives. Okay. Worse is the constant use of the Mintakans of the word reasonable, employed as a cheap substitute for logical.
That's also, I feel, a pretty nitpicky dislike.
Yeah, I kind of liked it. Because I knew that they were using it to replace logic, but it seemed like it made sense.
I would like to assume that there's another Vulcan-esque race that just when presented with the same sort of issues, they go, "Yeah, that sounds fine."
Yeah, they're neither emotional nor logical. They're just like, "Yeah, that's good. That's fine. I'm okay with that." Just the final thing. This episode firmly makes clear that TNG's interpretation of the Prime Directive will be a little too absolute and all-encompassing to the point of absurdity. I kind of agree with this point. Picard asks Crusher why she didn't let Liko die, dismissing her point that it was their fault he was injured, an appalling and despicable lack of compassion on the part of our theoretical hero. I don't really agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's tough because the whole point of the Prime Directive is that you're supposed to follow it to the letter.
Right. Yeah.
It's the most. He says it in the show. It's the most important rule they have.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess I don't think him being that cold about it is out of character or unreasonable at all.
Right. It's his drive. Like his life is Starfleet at this point. And this is Starfleet's numero uno rule. Yeah. It makes sense to me.
I mean, I have a bigger problem with the concept. The Prime Directive concept in general, in that it is their biggest rule. It is the one that they hold in the highest regard. But I feel like the way they work within it is just bad.
Are you suggesting
you must go down to Mintaka 3,
masquerading as a god?
Absolutely out of the question. The Prime Directive
has already been violated. The damage is done. All we can do now is minimize it.
By sanctioning their false beliefs?
By giving them guidelines, letting them know what the Overseer expects of them.
Dr. Barron, I will not impose a set of commandments on these people. To do so violates the very essence of the Prime Directive.
Like it or not, we have rekindled the Mintakan's belief in the Overseer.
And are you saying that this belief will eventually become a religion?
It's inevitable. And without guidance, that religion could degenerate into inquisitions, holy wars, chaos.
Dr. Barron, your report describes how rational these people are millennia ago. They abandoned their belief in the supernatural. Now, you are asking me to sabotage that achievement, to send them back into the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear? No!
Well, it always feels like whenever they violate it, I'm always surprised that there's not like an SOP that someone would pull out and be like, this is how you resolve this issue with the Prime Directive.
Yeah,
because they're always sort of blown away that it fails when it's like comically easy for it to fail all the time, like, because they're always sending people down to go interact with or like spy on other people.
Right.
So I'm always surprised that they're always kind of blown away by how, I know it makes good drama, but it doesn't make sense in the terms of if this is their most important rule, they don't have a fallback contingency.
Yeah, and I mean, my issue with it goes even further removed from that, where it's like, well, why are you there at all then? If I know the idea is to, you know, quote, seek out new worlds and new civilizations and not to interfere.
Yeah.
But I feel like putting people down on the planet is immediately interfering.
Yes.
Like there's a certain line where it's clear that there's not really a definition of what is okay and what isn't to a certain point.
Right.
But after that point, it's like, well, you can't do this.
Right. And you kind of reminded me of something else I thought, because you know, they're always like the Prime Directive, you can't interfere with people. You can't cause them to like develop in a way that it wouldn't be natural for them, even though that sort of kind of doesn't really make sense to me. But the Federation has, I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but they have like certain requirements for membership, which they've talked about in previous episodes.
Your dad has to be part of it.
Yeah, you have to be 1/6 Federation member or something. But if you're gonna have like this ethical standard for people who come in, wouldn't you want to mold? Aren't you saying that is a better race? Wouldn't you want to mold these like pre-warp societies?
I mean, yeah, but that can get out of hand very quickly. I think you can very quickly get into that's a I don't really know how to get into it, but I feel like that can go wrong very easily. Let's put it that way. Because
it can, but the problem sort of is, I think, that the Federation considers themselves morally upright. So it's not even like they're torn about whether or what they're doing is a good thing.
Right. Okay.
They always kind of consider it to be good, and they also I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but they also won't, like, the Prime Directive is so absolute that they won't help cultures that are in danger. You know?
Well, I kind of understand that, because I'm thinking of it from, sort of an extreme angle, but it's like if you tried to mold a certain civilization, and you're like, here's 4 things that you should use to advance your culture, and then those 4 things are then used for something completely different than you intended,
right?
And causes some sort of civil war or some shit, that episode with the clones.
Oh, I was thinking the old man, the aging episode.
Oh,
yeah,
gave them guns.
Too. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, giving them guns. But it's that kind of interference where I understand why they would want to keep their distance, and I also to a point understand the idea that, well, if this place is going to be destroyed, we can't step in.
So what if they come across a pre-warp genocidal race? Is it not in their best interest to interfere at that point?
Well, I don't know. Which one is Riker in love with?
And they can't have sex, so they're totally out of place. I think we'll save this one for another discussion. It's because I'm sure we're going to have 20 more Prime Directive episodes to go through, so we shouldn't blow our wad on this one too early. But I'll wrap it up right here. I think we'll give our final thoughts.
Picard, why would a people so advanced want to learn about us?
We were once as you are now. To study you is to understand ourselves.
Why do you have to hide yourself from us?
Because their presence would affect us, just as it affected me.
It is our highest law that we shall not interfere with other cultures.
Then revealing yourselves was an accident.
Oh, yes. And now we must leave you.
Why? There's so much you can teach us.
But that, too, would be interference. You must progress in your own way.
So we will. You have taught us there is nothing beyond our reach.
Not even the stars.
Taki. I wish you good journeys, Picard. Remember my people.
Always.
So, Clay, how would you rate this episode?
I would rate this episode I would almost go a 4 on this.
Yep.
I would say a solid 3, a maybe 4.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I just, like I said, I think they tackle some interesting topics and they do it well. I just wish, like I said, I wish it wasn't so dated looking.
Yeah.
I mean, everything from the way, just all I can picture in my head right now thinking about it is Troi and Riker dressed as hobbits.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's funny. You did you watch this on your TV?
I did, yes.
Okay, I watched it on my phone while I was at the gym, and it's that weird thing of like when you decrease,
as it was intended to be watched.
I tweeted about it too. It's like if you want to remember how junior high felt, you should watch a show on your phone at the gym. Like you'll feel immediately uncomfortable about what's going on. But I was, it looked super sharp because it was small. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'd have to watch it on the TV to see, because I thought the set looked good. And like the ship and everything looked good. Like I thought the direction and like the coloring and everything looked really sharp.
Yeah.
I don't know if I blew it out on my TV if it would look quite as good, but so I didn't notice the outfits, I guess would be my point, because they were much smaller looking.
Yeah. They just, I don't know. They were, I try to give the show as much of a pass on that stuff as I can.
Yeah.
But I think I liked the content of this one so much that it actually kind of bummed me out.
Yeah, I can see that. No, that's interesting. I think I really agree with you too. I was watching it. I was like, I think this is a strong 3, maybe a 4. And yeah. I think Picard getting shot at the end pushed it over to a 4. As weird as that sounds, like it was a drastic enough ending to please me, if that makes any sense. Like if he hadn't been shot, I would have thought it was a little bit of a letdown.
The number one thing I look for as a mark of a good show is stories that have consequences to them.
Right.
And one of the things that gets so overused in movies and television and everything are people pulling weapons and never using them.
Right. Yeah.
If you've got a scene where everybody's got a gun, but everybody who has a gun is in the main credits of the show, no one's going to use those guns.
Right.
If they're all pointing guns at each other.
Yep.
And very often in this setup that you have at the end of this episode, that Ray Watts would just like start crying or something, or you're just I can't, my wife, or whatever.
Right.
But the fact that
he pulled the bow taunt and then let it go, or just like shoot it over him.
Yeah, the fact that instead of having him break down and be overcome with his emotion about his wife or whatever that way, they actually have him double down and be like, okay, I'm going to shoot this guy. That's how badly I want him to be a god.
Right. Once I prove that he's a god, he'll have to fix my wife.
Exactly.
Basically.
I mean, that's, I'm down with that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So I think I am going to give this a 4 in the long run. I gave Survivors a 5. I think this is a little bit not quite as good as Survivor, so it makes sense to me being a 4. But I think you could show this to someone. It's for how low key it is, it's a good episode.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are stakes to it. It's not like there aren't any stakes, but it's very, it's a lot of talk, not a super amount of action. And I think it works out pretty well.
Yeah. Now that you said stakes, there are stakes, but I feel like there could have been more.
Well, I mean, it is it is like an alien culture sort of riding on
Oh, I guess there are stakes because they're threatening to kill Troi. So that's fairly high stakes.
Yeah, well, I think it's unusual because it's stakes on the part of the guest stars, instead of stakes on the crew. So there's no real stakes to the crew here. And I think maybe just because we're not going to see the guest stars again, you kind of dismiss what they went through, if that makes sense. But I think it's good. I mean, they Star Trek will always have a hard time pulling off the super gravitas. Even though I thought the music in this one was excellent. Did you notice music?
I actually did not notice it.
You didn't? Yeah, the music was very very dramatic. It was sort of eye or ear catching, I guess. Would be more appropriate.
I did really like at the end when they're all kind of sitting around that rock as Picard's saying goodbye.
Yeah,
and he's like, we wanted to a place where we can watch your people develop, and it's like 8 people. Like there's no implication that there are other people on this planet whatsoever.
Always a huge problem.
Like
always a problem.
Realistically, if this guy had discovered a god being, that message would be passed through every tribe, and that last scene where Picard shows up and gets shot there would be like 50,000 people there.
Yeah, well, the scene where he says goodbye, they would all show up.
Yeah, so that one too,
it would be a huge crowd around him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always going to be a problem. Always going to be a problem. Cool. Well, thank you, Clay, for coming on, talking about it.
Thank you for having me back once again.
You have anything you want to plug?
Well, you and I are doing a podcast about the British sci-fi television show The Prisoner, called Back in the Village, The Prisoner Podcast. And if you're interested in that, you can find it at backinthevillage.com or follow us on Twitter at Prisoner Podcast. And if you're into comic books, you can find my stuff. I've been writing and drawing a graphic novel for about 5 or 6 years now called Dead Meat. You can find that at eatdeadmeat.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're slowly making our way through season 3, but it's definitely getting better. The episodes are enjoyable now at this point. I'm sure we'll still have a few fun stinkers in there mixed in, but
yeah, I think that's what bummed me out about the look of this one, because it still feels. I mean, I guess the whole show is going to feel this way, but it feels old, and it reminds me of season 1, but the story was legit good.
Yeah, it's sort of amazing. It's sort of amazing the impact that the new uniforms have. Like I find myself paying attention to them a lot, and it makes things seem better. It's like I think the direction is also picked up. I don't know if they have more time or something. Maybe it's just the early episodes. But I should note that this is Michael Wagner is the last episode as executive producer, showrunner. Oh. So Pillar is going to come after this with the bonding. I think is the next episode.
Do we ever see those subcutaneous communicators again?
No, but why don't they just use those all the time?
Well, you want to be able to take your badge off and leave your work at work.
Oh, that's true.
If you're in the holodeck, and you've brought some baby oil with you, and it's about to get weird, you don't want to have someone hit the wrong button and hear what you're doing.
Right. Or they tune into you, or they interrupt you in your moment. But on that one, I guess we'll end it. So thank you guys for listening. If you listen to this and you enjoy the content on YouTube, comment is always appreciated. If you're on iTunes, a rating review, very, very helpful to us. And I'll be back with, I think The Bonding is next. Is that right? Yeah, it is. Ron Moore's introduction to Trek, The Bonding. So, Clay, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
See you guys.